How I kept going on. Going through this is one of the most incredibly difficult, stressful, trying times that you're ever going to go through. It's the hardest thing that you'll experience. I've talked about that before, and I think that sometimes it gets lost on just the complexity of this situation. Now, in the midst of all that, when you're going through that, you're inevitably going to go through times where you just feel like you can't go on, like you feel like everything is coming at you all at once, that there's nothing that you can really do, that every time you try something, you get smacked down, that the system is stacked against you. Your ex just has an incredible ability to just keep, nothing impacts them. While you're sitting there, dealing with and feeling like every bump in the road. So the single most important thing about getting through this is really perseverance. Now, I've made videos about that in the past, but it's really true. And sometimes, even on that, sometimes you can get lost on that word, like, well, what does that really mean? What does that really mean to persevere through this? You can look at it in other situations that if you're trying something and you just keep working at it to get through it, which is all the same. It's the same thing, but in a different context, talking about something, that you would consider normal, like, I don't know, working on your degree or trying to finish a project at work or trying to exercise or whatever those things are that you've maybe persevered in the past on. The difference with this is you're trying to persevere through the emotional abuse and trauma that you're dealing with. And you don't really necessarily get a break from it because it's always there. You wake up in the morning and it's there. You lay it down at bed at night, it's there. In the middle of the day, it's there. You're seeing your kids, it's there. And it can feel like you're trapped. So at my lowest, and just so you realize, I've gone through everything for the most part that you've gone through. The same feelings, the same emotions, the same self-doubts, the same frustration, the same, good times, the same bad times. And I get that everyone's situation is just a little bit different, but the reason I want to say that is, when people ask those questions and they feel like they can't get anywhere, I just want you to realize that I had, at a moment in time, a few years back, 4 or 5 years ago, was sitting in this house thinking pretty much the same thing. There's probably some subtle nuance differences, but it's along the same lines, right? And I got to the point where I wasn't sure whether I could keep going on. I wasn't sure if I could keep fighting. And it's really scary to think about that. And that is really just, one of the main reasons why I made this site. Because when I was at that low point, I couldn't find anything or somebody who had actually gone through the same thing that I could relate to and talk to. We've already talked before about, the people that just say, well, let it go. You just need to get over it. And, we've talked about that. That's not helpful. And I didn't necessarily have that, but I didn't have anybody who necessarily understood what was actually going on. So they couldn't give me really targeted advice about what I was dealing with and why it was taking so long. So as a result of that, that was the reason why when I got to the point that I felt I was doing pretty good, that I created this site. Because I wanted you to know that somebody who was there, who was going through the same thing, had made it through it. And hopefully that would be the lifeline to help you get to move forward. Okay, so the difference is, right, I didn't have a channel like this. So what exactly did I do to persevere through this? And to be quite honest, the main thing that happened to me is I got angry. I got angry and basically made the decision that she wasn't going to break me. She wasn't going to win. She wasn't going to get me to give up. I wasn't going to give up on myself. I wasn't going to give up on my kids. I wasn't going to give up on the situation. Now, it felt pretty bad, but it was one of those things where I looked to, it's not even so much that I had real hope that the future was going to be okay. But it was like, I am not giving up. I am not going to let her win. I am not going to just roll over and say, I can't take it anymore. And there were days that it was really tough, that I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do that. So on those days, what do you do? Well, one, you don't make any rash decision whenever you're beat down like that. That's not the time to make a decision on anything. That's not the time to decide what you're going to do with the custody of your kids, what you're going to do with your job, what you're going to do with the rest of your life. It's not the time. You take a break. What I would do is I would sleep. If I was really burnt out, I would just sleep. Now, I don't know if that works for you. Maybe there's something else that works for you, but you find something to delay making a decision. And what I will tell you on that, and for me, this is the way it always worked out. Within a day or two, I normally could get enough energy back to get back, basically get back up and start moving forward again. And it's all about those little micro improvements. And hopefully you can keep track of it so you can see it. So you can see that you're making improvements, that you can see that things are starting to change, even if it's just a little bit, and keep moving forward. And the crazy part is it's basically like a state of mind. You start modifying the way you think and the way you look, and you stop looking at what's happened to you, what you've lost, what your current immediate situation is. And all of those things can be very traumatic. They can be catastrophic. I've talked about them before in some other videos. In my situation, I lost my retirement. I lost my retirement savings. I lost, my ability to save. For the longest time, I was really frustrated that I felt like I was just idling in place. I was unable to go forward. I was not making any progress. And I was just watching days and years just fall away like there was nothing. There wasn't really anything I could do. That's not entirely true, but that's the way I felt. I felt like I was trapped, that this person had stuck me in a box, and that I was in limbo until something changed, until she got a job, which she hasn't done, or until the kids grew up, which they're just now starting to do that. So, it's been 6 years to get to this point. And you guys know from this channel, I've been doing this for almost a year. And this wasn't one of those things where I just decided one day that I was going to do this. I was feeling better and decided that, hey, now is a time that I think I could offer something positive to do this. The other thing that kept me going was knowing that my kids needed an alternate role model to have any chance of having a good adult life. Now, like I mentioned earlier, my oldest has just turned 18. I still have a 16-year-old and I still have an 11-year-old. So do I know if my efforts have worked? I'm not sure, right? I feel good about some things, bad about other things, but overall it's a positive. But when I was going through this, that was one of those things that helped keep me going, because I knew that if I gave up on the kids and I wasn't around to provide that alternative, view or that alternative way of treating people or interacting with people, then all they were going to have was the other parent with no other influence. And I know for me, because that's the way I grew up. I grew up under one parent who was emotionally abusive. I didn't know any better. My other parent just couldn't deal with it anymore. They couldn't deal, and I get it. I don't fault him for my dad for backing out, because I get it. I'm going through it. I understand where he was at. It would have been nice if he could have tried something different. Absolutely. But not everyone has the skill sets to do it. Not everyone not everyone has, YouTube channels where you have people who can help you understand what you're going through. And you roll the clock back whenever I was a kid, I guarantee you that it was more of get over it, move on. It just happens. Everyone back in the day, rolling the clock back, 40 years, 35, 40 years, there was no understanding of this stuff. The one parent, the mom generally got the kids, and whatever she did is what she did. And if it was bad, then people just made excuses for it. Like, well, that's just what happens. I mean, if you were lucky and your ex didn't have narcissistic traits and really would think about the best interest of the kids, then you probably could have a good relationship. But unfortunately, that's not the situation that we're in. And that's not the situation that my own dad was in. So bottom line is, you have to come up with whatever the fight is to keep you going. And I'll roll this up here real quick just to summarize this a little bit. I think it's in phases, right? You can be wanting to give up on your kids to where you just can't deal with it anymore. And you're like, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to fight. She can have custody. She can have the money. She can have everything. I can't deal with this on a daily basis. And if you're in that situation and you've been able to sleep on it, and you've been able to, look at the deck that you've been dealt, so to speak, and if that's your best decision that you've made after you're calm and rational, not emotional, you need to make sure that you can take a step back and you're making that decision based on your best interest. And what I mean is that if it's going to destroy you, then it's time to give up. If you're thinking about doing something really bad to yourself, one, you need to call and seek help immediately. Call one of the suicide hotlines, whatever you have to do, because it's not worth it. It's not worth it to give up to that point. And, it's phases. It's like, okay, so if you can't deal with it, you not break down, but you slow down, or you revert down to what you need to keep your core person going. Hopefully you can find the same thing for me. Hopefully you can find maybe a little bit of that anger, not that you're going to lash out at the other person, but that that you're thinking, I have the perseverance to wait this out. I'm going to keep my environment as stable as possible. I'll deal with whatever comes up, because at some point, if I can do that, this person is no longer going to have any control over you, is no longer going to be able to manipulate you, is no longer going to have minor children that she can use as surrogates. Now, granted, obviously that could still continue in adulthood, but things tend to change whenever they no longer have that control and power. Right now, the stuff that they're doing is because they feel emboldened and empowered to do what they're doing. The family court system is incredibly unfair in that regard. But to get back to the original question, I kept going because I got angry, and I'm like, no, I am not going to give up. You are not going to break me. It is not going to happen. Because I got close. I got close to giving up on the whole thing. And, so if you're feeling that way, don't beat yourself up on it, because I think every one of us has had those days where it's like, how am I going to keep going on this? And unfortunately, that's normal, right? I don't want you to look at me and see somebody who was, going 100% on day one. I wasn't. I've talked about that in a lot of different videos. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done things and made decisions that I thought were the best at the time, but that was without the understanding and the awareness of what I was really dealing with to make better decisions. Again, that's one of the reasons for this site. If I can share those experiences, and hopefully you don't make those same mistakes I made, that's going to help you recover faster. That's going to help you build a better, stable environment for yourself and your children. And it's going to help you start repairing and increasing the relationship that you have with your kids. And all of that results in minimizing the impact and the power of your ex. Okay, so if you are having problems with this, I hope that this video helped. I have some other videos that I've talked about this before. A lot of them were titled, had perseverance in the title. Just give yourself the time to deal with this. Early in the stages of this, it's really stressful and it's really complicated. And if you're having those days where it feels like this recursive do loop, where if you don't know about programming terms, where it's just like you're kind of saying, if true, then loop. If true, right? So it's always true. So it just keeps going and going and going. Just slow yourself down. Realize that this is part of the emotional trauma that you're going through and the stages of recovery of this. And you can slow down and remove that power that person has over you. Now, is that going to make your environment switch overnight? No. But take this into account. I'm in the exact same situation, from custody, financially, the whole 9 yards, that I was in, 5 years ago when the divorce was final. Not much has changed. However, I feel a lot better. I'm doing better. I mean, my whole perspective is, I can see a future. Now, part of that is I'm rolling on the time where kids are starting to drop off, but that's a positive. But other than that, the only thing that's really changed in this scenario has been me. I've changed my perspective on how I look at this, how I interact with it, and it's made a huge difference in my entire life. And it's made a huge difference in my relationship with my kids. So on that, just persevering and keep moving forward, keep, one day at a time. That's the key, and before you know it, you're going to start seeing improvements. Before you know it, those groundhog days with your kids will start getting better. I personally thought that was never going to happen. And it started happening. So it's hard to keep hope in this. It's hard to think that there's a future, but there really is. And you just have to keep, like I said, keep moving forward, and you're going to get there. If you need to vent sometimes, vent in the comments, send me an email. I'll do everything I can to answer and interact. Sometimes I get slow, but I do everything I can. All right. So on that, if you want to talk about this, on what you've been able to do to keep going on, or if you're struggling with it, put it in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you do like the channel, please subscribe, and I will talk to you guys on the next video. Take care.